You didn't stumble upon this video by accident, my friends. Nope, no way. This is fate, divine intervention, sent straight from the football gods to deliver you a win this year. That's not true. Actually, this is how the YouTube algorithm works. What happens is it'll see that you're interested in fantasy football and it'll recommend a video like this to you. But you're here now, so that's besides the point. And you're here because you want to win. Because, well, losing sucks ass. And that's what we're going to do. You know, especially when you look around the room, you're drafting in person, you go, I'm smarter than that guy. Shit, I'm much smarter than that guy. That dude doesn't even know where he is because he's 5 Jack drinks deep within the first hour and doesn't know who he's drafting. You say, I put all the work in, but I just can't win. Now you're about to win. I'm about to take it to the promised land. And usually all it takes is being able to identify a few holes, a few leaks, right? Being able to patch them, being able to correct a few mistakes. And we all make those mistakes. Very simple. We all make those mistakes. It's easy to fall back in those habits, but today we're going to break them. And that's why we got the top 8 biggest mistakes that you need to avoid in order to not lose your leagues in 2022. Let's roll. Oh, and stick around for number 1 on this list because it's the biggest killer in any draft and you're not going to want to miss it. Number 8, too much love for a player. I know it's easy to fall in love with the player, right? You circle them on your rankings and you say, I need to get them on my team. I got to land them. But going wildly out of your way in order to do so is absolutely defeating the purpose of really having a lot of admiration for a player or really loving a player, because there's going to be times where you correctly identify value in a player. You correctly see something in a player that no one else in your league does, and you end up being right about that. But there's no actual value in doing so if you're reaching for them outside of, you know, a few picks, like a handful of picks. For example, I had a draft earlier today. I'm not saying you can't draft to take them a little bit higher. I was the first overall pick. I got 2 great, I love Jonathan Taylor. I got him, and then I got Javonte Williams in the 2nd round. 3rd round comes back around to me. And Michael Pittman, you know, anywhere sharp has an ADP around 29-30. So I took him at 25, which is fine. You know, and then I took Courtland Sutton in the next round, a few spots higher than his ADP, but it's in the same round. You know, you're in the ballpark there. And those are guys that if they're there in that round, I want to be able to get them. What I'm talking about is going ahead and drafting a guy a full round, or God forbid, multiple rounds ahead of where they're going. And the reason you shouldn't do that isn't because you might not be right or they might not have a big season, but it's because you're defeating the purpose. There's no value left, right? There's no meat left on the bone when you're taking them well ahead of their ADP. The whole idea here is to say, look, I see where they're at, where their ADP is, where they're going. If I can get them in that ballpark, I'm getting what I would consider to be a steal, right? That's where the value is in these drafts. There's no value in taking them 2 rounds ahead. So all I'm saying is if you think their draft or their ADP should be exponentially higher than it is, then try and get them around where they're going. Don't draft them where you think their ADP should be. That's just not going to help you at all. Target them, prioritize them even, but don't go out of your way to land them. It kills the value. Number 7, too much hate for a player. And this is essentially the same thing as number 8, but in reverse. You basically convince yourself that a player is undraftable. There's no way he can produce, whether it's they're injury prone or the offense is expected to be dog shit, or the looming possibility of a suspension adds too much risk into the equation. So it leads you to end up saying, I can't draft them even if they fall far down the draft board because everyone in my league feels the same way that I do. You go, I can't take him. But the truth is that no player is undraftable. And I think most of you understand that. Even if you don't want them at their ADP, which is totally fine. There's a lot of players at their current ADP that I want nothing to do with. But winning fantasy drafts, if you were to just break it down, not get granular, just break it down very simply, is outside of, trades and great roster moves, trades or whatever. But in terms of like good waiver wire moves, sure. That can be massive when you're landing, every week starters off the waiver. If you get 1 or 2 of them a season, you're in great shape. But in the draft, it's all about just identifying value and seizing that opportunity when it presents itself. And it's not going to happen every round. So you have to take advantage of it when it does. Like if it's targeting a player around his ADP who you think is undervalued, right? Or not drafting a guy at his ADP, but then when they drop 2 rounds because nobody wants to draft him, you go, all right, well, I might not trust him, but at least the risk is mitigated now. I don't have to love this player. I didn't love them in the 8th round, but in the 10th round, it doesn't matter if I don't love them because they fell far enough to where I'm willing to take that chance. So you don't have to trust them. Just understand that any player is draftable. If you haven't checked out Underdog Fantasy, it is clearly the best place to play best ball. I don't think there's any debates at this point anymore. Most of you guys have already signed up there. Matter of fact, the guy who won the $1 million last year drafted his team in June, and he was a good friend of the channel and viewer of the Stokastic Fantasy Football channel. What's going on, brother? When you sign up, use the promo code Stokastic. You have to use the promo code Stokastic, Stokastic. Get up to $100 match deposit bonus. They have monster prize pools, $10 million in prize money in the Best Ball Mania 3 right now. Even the regular season winner gets $1 million. You could shit the bed in the playoffs, still $1 million. And you got some smaller ones, $5 entry, $100,000 prize pools. Use the promo code Stokastic, Stokastic. Get up to $100 deposit bonus when you sign up over at UnderdogFantasy.com. Number 6, big one, not knowing where to take risks. Now, I'm not saying go into your drafts and draft like a okay. What I am saying, though, is know the right spots to take risks. Just like we talked with 8 and 7. Know the right spots to take a guy that you really like. Know the right spots to take a guy that you don't like if he falls to you. Know where to take risks. There's no need in the 2nd round or the 1st round to make some big splash and have everyone go, oh man, does this guy know something I don't? Very high likelihood that you don't know something that they don't know. Very likely that you just are making a horrible mistake and a bad decision, and it's going to bite you in the ass. The truth is, taking risks in fantasy football is what can win you leagues, but you're trying to take those risks later in drafts and find that value. For example, last year, nobody, and listen, I got plenty wrong last year. We all did, but a few things that I got right were big enough to put me up top in a bunch of leagues. Like saying, you know what, I'll take James Conner and really don't want any Chase Edmonds at his ADP. I think Conner will be the guy that's getting all of the red zone and goal line work. Or saying, yeah, it's a risk on Brandon Cooks in the 8th round because his quarterback, whether it's Tyrod Taylor, Davis Mills, the team sucks, the offensive line blows, all of that. But you know what? He's the only wide receiver of note on this entire roster. In the 8th round, that sounds pretty good. Those guys had nice seasons where you took them. And quite frankly, there wasn't a ton of risk there involved anyway. So taking risks in the later rounds is so much different than taking risks in the early rounds. If you take risks and you fail in the early rounds, you can jack up your entire season, right? Unless you make great moves, unless you pull some magic out of your hat. If you take risks in the later rounds, you know, and by risks, I mean guys that are unknown or circumstances that have a lot of questions, right? Maybe it's a running back battle and you're not sure who it's going to be. But in this case, all right, instead of taking the guy that isn't the clear starter but is being drafted like one, I'll take the guy that's also not the clear starter and is being drafted like a backup. Or I'll take the wide receiver on a team that's horrible, but he might have a 30% target share. And in doing so, if I'm wrong, who cares? Who cares? You're not going to lose your league by missing on an 8th or especially a 10th round pick, but even an 8th round pick. That will not lose your leagues. Taking risks just out of pure, just being brazen and thinking that you know more than everybody else and drafting, you know, a 3rd round player in the 1st round, where if you take any of those other players in the 1st round, they're 1st round draft picks for a reason, and they're probably going to have great seasons, barring injuries or suspensions or anything. You're just putting yourself behind the 8 ball out of the gate. You're shooting yourself in the foot before the season even begins. It's a huge one. Pay attention to it. Number 5, always my favorite, being a massive homer. Now, I believe, and I thought of this the other day, that subconscious homerism, bear with me, is actually a thing, and it'll burn you. Now, not all of you have a favorite team, maybe, but a lot of you, I guarantee it, because I know what home leagues are like. I'm still in plenty of them. I know with a lot of home leagues, especially in like football crazed towns, you can see from behind me, the Philadelphia area, people love the Eagles, all right? You're going to see guys like A.J. Brown go well ahead of ADP. You're going to see Devontae Smith go ahead of his ADP. You're going to see Miles Sanders go ahead of his ADP in a lot of these drafts, because there's always going to be that guy or girl or whoever you're drafting with that goes, you know what, big season from him. But by subconscious homerism, this is what I mean. I think this makes a lot of sense. you might not think you're being a homer, but instinctively, you're hyping all of these guys up in your head because you know more about this team than any other team. You hear about it every single day. So do your league mates. They hear about it every day, whether it's sports radio, whether it's Twitter, whether it's Facebook. All you do is hear about these players. And in doing so, you'd be like, AJ Brown and the Jalen Hurts connection is sick right now. It's unreal. They can't miss anything. Or Miles Sanders put on weight, looks like a freight train out there. Can't miss, great explosion, breakaway speed, patience behind the line. You're like, okay, this is all of their year. So then you reach on them. But if you were listening to all of the other 31 teams, you'd be hearing very similar stuff. So subconsciously, all of these guys get pushed up your rankings. That makes sense, right? So be careful with that. And instead, right, as an alternative, if you want to get some guys to cheer for on your team, take them in the later rounds. Say you're a Bucs fan, right? If you don't get Godwin or Evans and people are drafting them way ahead of where they should be, or Leonard Fournette or whoever, go with Julio Jones. Go with Russell Gage. You know, Tom Brady throws more than any quarterback in the league. At least he did last year by 49 attempts. Take shots on guys later in the drafts, you know, and give yourself an opportunity there. So maybe you'll still have something invested, but you don't have to go out of your way to draft someone and screw up your draft. Because, yeah, it might be fun rooting for the home team, but that doesn't mean shit if you're losing every week because you drafted them well ahead of where they should go. Subconscious homerism. Let's make that a thing. I like it. Number 4, prioritizing running back handcuffs. This one's simple. If you're playing in a league where the bench is not very large, you cannot be handcuffing your top running backs and thinking it's a good idea. Now, I know that traditionally you've heard like you got to handcuff running backs, but let's not forget, if you were playing football, and I'm sure plenty of you were, like a decade ago, all the quarterbacks were going in the first round. Things changed a lot, right? If you're handcuffing a running back, all that means is you have a guy sitting on your bench that you cannot roster at all. He has zero utility until your starting running back gets hurt. And if your starting running back's a first rounder, that just means you lost your first round pick anyway. So, talking alternatives again. So as an alternative, again, instead of drafting the handcuff or the backup to your own running back, take one or two. I mean, it depends how big your bench is, from one of the other star running backs. That's how you leverage the situation and put yourself in an advantageous spot if things break your way. So let's say you drafted Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry's still healthy, right? But then instead of drafting like Dontrell Hilliard as a handcuff, who you're never going to use and who isn't good anyway, go ahead and take Nyheim Hines. Right? If Jonathan Taylor goes down and you still have Derrick Henry, then you have Nyheim Hines and you have Derrick Henry. Or take Alexander Madison, or take Isaiah Spiller. Take guys like that. Don't handcuff your own guys because they're going to waste away on the bench. Take a backup or two, depending on your roster size, of course, and leverage that situation. That's how you work with backup running back. Number 3, I don't hear this mistake talked about enough. I actually talked about it last season as well. And I think it needs to be talked about again. Using default rankings. If you go on Yahoo right now, they will auto sort by like X rank, which is their preseason expert rankings. Go take a look at how absurd some of them are. It's crazy. If you go in blind, like say, I know some of you haven't done a ton of research. Let's just say you haven't done a ton of research, or maybe not enough, or you have, but you still use those rankings. What happens is there's going to be guys you like, but you just get caught up in the draft. And then they're so far down the list because these X rankings or whatever some of these other sites, ESPN, CBS are using that are just flat out wrong are going to make it so that they don't even show up on the page. And then you see they get drafted and you go, shit, I really liked that guy. Forgot he was there. I could have taken him here. So it's like he goes in the 5th round. Yeah, he has a 5th round ADP anywhere else, but they've got him ranked as like a 7th round pick and you forgot about it. Or in worst case scenario, here's what I would say. Use rankings you trust. Go into it with rankings you trust. If you can upload them there, or if you just have them with you. We have the Stokastic package for fantasy football. Super affordable, awesome rankings from the #1 DFS player in the world, and an amazing team that we've got behind the scenes. You can check that out. Link is in the description. But at least sort by ADP. At least sort by ADP. It's going to be tough around this time of year, like mid-August. It's not sharp yet. But very soon, or early August, I guess, still, very soon you're going to see these ADPs sharpen up. and that's going to put you in a better spot. Never use these default rankings. It'll kill you. You miss out on guys. You forget about players. You end up taking players way earlier than they should be too, and that's just as bad as missing a guy that you like. Number two, and this is a mistake I see all the time, is people filling out their starting lineups first and feeling like they can't target anybody that would go on their bench before they go in their starting lineup. Horrible mistake. And not just like kickers and defenses. Stream kickers and defenses. I'll go some drafts and I won't even draft a kicker or defense. Doesn't matter. I'll wait till the season gets closer, watch some preseason games, and then decide who I want to drop. And then I'll pick up a kicker or a defense, assuming that I have to start one. But in any case, look at this as a scenario where there's going to be dead zones in any draft. Okay. You're not going to be loaded at every single position unless you're drafting with idiots. In that case, good for you. That's awesome. Everyone loves to draft with idiots, but let's assume that you're drafting with some sharp people. In a case like this, you're going to have spots where maybe you're weak at tight end. Maybe another team, you didn't get a quarterback. So let's just say your starting lineup is almost filled, right? But you still haven't drafted a quarterback. And then again, kicker and defense, whatever. Let's not talk about that. So you go ahead and you draft a quarterback anyway, even though all of the elite ones are gone. And now you're in a spot where it's like, okay, I could take this quarterback, or I could take a wide receiver or a running back in this spot. That's still a nice round. Like say we're in the 7th round, you still have some really good opportunities there. Some high upside wide receivers and running backs at positions that thin out a lot more than quarterback does towards the end. And in positions that you cannot successfully stream from week to week by pulling guys off the waiver. Don't ever hesitate to draft players into your bench roles before your starting lineup is filled. You will get quarterback opportunities to draft later in the draft. Tight end's another good example. This is not especially after we saw from Darren Waller last year. That's another guy now. Devontae Adams is there, takes one out of the mix. Hard to say what Kittle's going to look like with Trey Lance at quarterback. And you could go down the list like TJ Hawkinson. There's not that many stud tight ends, and a lot of the ones that we like are speculative. So if you don't land any of them, don't go ahead and just draft one for the sake of getting one on your team in the 8th round or the 7th round. Take a good player. Take a good player at a position that you know there's upside, a massive ceiling, and a good floor, and then wait and take a tight end later. You don't have to fill your starting lineup out before you start attacking the bench. Last one, number one. This is the biggest one for me, and I think it just kills people every season. It's not being flexible in your draft strategies. Depending on what spot you're drafting at, certain strategies just aren't going to be viable or as viable. Like you could go into a draft feeling very good about it. You've done mock drafts, everything worked out, and then it all devolves into shit through the first couple rounds, and you're going, oh, God, all right, what do I do? I wasn't ready for this. And then you start to panic, right? You start to take the running back because you wanted a running back in the first 2 rounds. You start to take, now it's the 2nd round, and there's no running backs that you really like left. So you reach on one that shouldn't be drafted where you think. Or you wanted 2 wide receivers and a running back, and you get to the 3rd round, and there's nobody that you had originally intended on drafting. You had a plan, you had players there, and now it's gone. It's out the window. Be willing to adjust, to adapt. Even if that means taking like a quarterback relatively early if you didn't want to. Like I didn't want to draft. I had a draft yesterday. I didn't want to draft any quarterbacks early, but Justin Herbert fell to me at the end of the 5th round. And if that's the case, I'm looking around and I say, all right, I have 2 good running backs right now. I have 2 good wide receivers. I'll take a top 3 quarterback and I'll be okay with it. That wasn't my approach going into it. It wasn't my strategy. It wasn't what I wanted to do, but I'm willing to adjust depending on what the field gives me, depending on what everyone else in the league gives me, depending on where I'm drafting, what pick I'm at. All of that's going to play heavily into it. Go with a value-based approach, especially in the event that what you wanted to do doesn't work out. Don't panic. Don't reach. Don't lose your mind because it's not playing out the way you thought it would, because most of the time it's not going to play out the way that you think it's going to. There we go. That's it. The 8 biggest mistakes that'll make you lose your league. I appreciate you guys watching, and I hope to hell that this one helped and that we can crush it this year. Follow me at Loughy_D on Twitter, LOUGHY_D, and hit that thumbs up and subscribe before you head out. Peace.